What is up guys? Welcome back to Full Stack Simplified. My name is Prashun and today we will see how we can manage a global state in our React Web application and also avoid the problems of props dealing by using the inbuilt context API. So make sure you stick to this video till the end. And now let's get started. In order to get started, I have created a simple React starter project. And here we have a simple class-based component and a functional-based component. And for now, they are simply showing this text on the browser. So basically, I have taken these two components because consuming context in class-based component and the functional-based component is quite different. So we will see how the things work, and also we will see how we can manage our state globally in our application. Now essentially, React Context API was developed by the React team in order to solve one of the basic and most important issue while maintaining an app-wide global state, that is props dealing. So now let us understand what this prop dealing is by using this simple flow diagram. So let us say we have an application structure something like this, where we have a app component at the root level having a user state. Now this app component also have some of its child component, something like this. And here are some of the more child components which are required to access this user state. Now in order to pass the user state to this particular child, we can simply pass it as a prop. But at the very last component, as we can see here, if we need to pass the user state, we need to pass it through this component. Now this is the basic problem of props dealing. We are passing a state as a props to this children which doesn't even require that. So this makes our code more harder to handle and also decreases the efficiency of our code. Now in order to avoid this thing, we use the context API. So instead of creating a user state in the app component, we create a context which manages everything related to user, maybe the methods or the state, into its context. Now in order to use context, we need to wrap our whole application with the context provider. And now each of the component within this wrapper have the ability to access context at any point of time and retrieve the data which it requires. So this essentially increases the efficiency of the code drastically and even improvises the performance of our application. I hope you get the basic of how the context API works, obviously with my pathetic drawing, but let us not just stick to this drawing and move to our code and see everything in action. So in our code, I will simply create a folder and name it context. And in here, I'll create a user context.js file. Here we need to first create our context. So I'll say export const user context is equals to create context. And here I'm simply going to pass an empty object denoting its initial state. Now here we also need an function named user context provider, which is equals to a function which simply returns user context dot provider, and in here we need to pass the children. Now this context provider requires a value, so let me say const value, and we will obviously set up this value as we go on. So I'm going to pass this, and let me simply close this thing, and here I'll create a simple state of user set user, which will be equals to use state, and initially let us give a value of null to it. I'll also have something like a loading state. So let us say if you are fetching this user data from any API, so we can also show this loading state while the data loads. So I'm going to say use state, and initially I will set this to true, and then in here we are also going to say use effect. Now I'll try to depict a API call thing, so I'll use the set timeout in the use effect. So I'll say const timer equals to set timeout, and this is going to take a callback function where it'll set the user to a random data. So I'll set name to my name and then we will have email, let's say abc@gmail.com, and we'll also have suppose a is active state. So I'll say is active, and since this user is active, I'll set a value of true. Now in here also we need to set the loading state to false, and we'll have a delay of, for an example, of 2 seconds. Now also we need to clear this timer when the components unmount. So I'm going to say clear timeout, and I'm going to pass this timer variable. And also this use state is going to run only when the app mounts for the first time. Now in here I'm going to pass these user, set user, loading, and set loading, and these values will be available to all the child components which are using the context to fetching these data. And also let us create a simple method so that I can show you that we can also create methods in our context, and we can use this method wherever we want. So let us say we have a method where we want to update the username. So it is going to accept name as its parameter, and we're going to say set user, and we are going to say previous state, and we're going to return new object where we are going to spread this previous state and also set the name to this variable. So we can simply save it, and also we can say update user in this value so that all the child component which is using the context have the access to this method. Now in order to consume this context, we need to go to our app component, and in here we are going to wrap everything under this user context provider. So basically all the components here and all the child components to these component and everything down the line will have the access to this context. So now we can go to our functional component, and here we are going to use the use context hook. So I'm going to say const context is equals to use context, and here we are going to pass the user context which we have created. So basically this context will have all the values which we are passing right here. So for an example, if we want user and loading, so let me grab this, and we can destructure the things right here. So I'm going to say user and loading from the context, and in here I'm going to simply show a loading text if the data is loading. So I'm going to say loading, and here we'll have a simple p tag showing this loading text. Now if the loading has been done and if the user data is present, we're going to say user, and here I will simply create a div, and here I'll have 3 tags, namely the name. So I'll say user.name, and here we'll have the email with user.email, and also we are going to say if the user is active. So we're going to say active to is active, and we'll also change this to the string using this toString method. Now if we simply save the code and refresh our browser, we can see this loading text for 2 seconds, and then we are simply going to see the text over here. Now this is how we consume context in functional component. So now in order to consume the context in a class-based component, it is quite different from the functional component. Here we need to wrap everything with this user context.consumer, and this thing is going to return us the context value. So I'm going to say context, and here we need to return the JSX what we want. So here I'll say return a fragment, and in here we are simply first let us simply paste our h2 tag saying the class component, and here I'm going to copy this thing exactly from our functional component, and here I'm going to paste everything like this. Now similar to the functional component, we can destructure our thing. We can say user and loading. So now let us also not forget to use this update user method which we have created in our context. So I'll quickly go to my functional component, and in here I'll create a simple input of type name, and in here we'll have the onChange event where we are going to create an anonymous function right here. So I'm going to say event, and I'm going to use this update username and set its value to e.target.value. So whatever the value of our input field is. Let us also close this, and as you can see I have also spreaded this update username method from our context. So now if I save this thing and start typing here, we can see that our username is getting changed in both of the components. So this is how context API work. If I change the value of the global state anywhere from any component, it will be reflected in all the components which is using it. So that is all about the React Context API. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button and also subscribe to this channel for more videos like this. I'll be back with new content soon. Till then, stay tuned and thanks for watching.